Welcome to the Ladies TalkShow. This is your host, Leah Richeimer. We are very, very lucky to have the most yum person, Rebbetzin Esti Hamilton. You may know her, or you may have heard of her. She's wise, she's yummy, she's a very, very deep thinker, but very practical as well. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love coming on your show.
Okay, fantastic. So we're gonna go very deep about Shalom Bayis today, and I know you have a lot to say about it. So I'm just going to start with a very, very first question, which is, what do you see as one of the main obstacles to Shalom Bayis today?
I think personal unhappiness is probably the main obstacle to Shalom Bayis today, because we talk about what is a Bayis Ne'eman B'Yisrael, or what is a couple? It is two souls that have come together as one, and we create an image that we're really one person. But in practicality, or in reality, we live as two separate beings, both husband and wife, and each one has their own goals and hopes and dreams and aspirations and disappointments and highs and lows. And if you are married for a long time, which I bless us all to be married for a long time to a wonderful partner, your life is going to have ups and downs and ups and downs. That's just the reality. So you're going to have some years where you feel really successful and really fulfilled, and some years where you feel very unsuccessful, very empty. The same is true also for men. So both men and women will go through in their lifetime that you will live together. So that could be 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, however many years you live together, months or years in their life where they are on top of their game, on the top, and feel amazing and feel like I've got it all and I did it all and I'm amazing. And then there's going to be times, and it could take months. It's not like a day or an hour. I'm not talking about mood swings within a day. I'm talking about deep feelings that could last months. And that happens for each couple at different times. So it's not that you're both down or you're both up. It's usually there is like waves happening all the time. And we often make the mistake of blaming our partner for not helping us enough in this matter, for not bringing us happiness, for not taking us out of the trouble that we're in, even though sometimes the trouble that we're in are in our own making. So let's say I, as a woman, decided by the time I'm 30, I want to have my degree. And let's say I didn't get my degree because I had many kids, or I had a job, or financially didn't work, or we moved countries. And then I hit the age of 30 and I look at my life and I think that I had a goal in my mind that I was going to have a degree by the time I'm 30. And then it didn't happen. And I'm a failure and I'm terrible. And it's my husband's fault. It's always the husband's fault. Right. The husband always thinks it's the wife's fault, meaning because this is the other adult living with you in the house, who you're supposed to be like as one with and doing everything together with, when in reality you're probably both going to different jobs, or one is staying at home and one's going to a job, or either way, and over a lifetime it could be one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. What happens is that you turn to your spouse and you go, it's because of you I didn't get that degree. It's because it's not, and you forget that this is shared life choices that you made, and it was because of unforeseen circumstance. It was because Hashem created a situation that you could never have predicted, and that's why you didn't reach that. So when I say we sometimes have misery of our own making, what I really mean is that we have expectations of who we're going to be, where we're going to live. Or let's say you have an expectation, by the time I'm this age I'm going to own a house, or I'm going to have X amount of children, or I'm going to, and your husband will have the same. By the time I'm 30, I'll own my own company. By the time I'm 40, I've made my first million. By time, and it could be that, or even with smaller things, that means we have hopes and dreams and expectations of different things, and those don't work out because life never works out exactly how you plan it, how Hashem plans it. And one of the biggest obstacles to Shalom Bayis is when we turn to our spouse and say, I wanted it to be this way, it's not this way, and you are the problem. And often when people say, oh, don't say they're the problem, really, when you point to your spouse and say you're the problem, it's really me, I'm the problem. I turn to myself and I say it's your fault, but really I should turn to myself and say it's my fault. But sometimes it's much better to just let go of it all and say it's not my fault or your fault. These are the circumstances of our life. And it came about because of a series of decisions that we made together that maybe we couldn't have seen the future of how these decisions would have played out. And therefore we find ourselves in this situation that maybe is not ideal. How can we plan together? So what happens is it's husband, wife, and problem in the middle, where it should be a husband and wife and problem on the other side, right? And so I like to give that visual because it makes people understand. It should be like I stand next to my spouse, we together have this issue. But instead, what happens is that I have this problem, and then I see my husband as the other side of the problem. Like it's because he's not doing X, Y, and Z, or he'll say it's because my wife isn't X, Y, and Z. But really, we're two separate people living in our own realities, sometimes of our own making in our own mind. And if we would make ourselves happy, if we would choose our happiness, we're really choosing our spouse's happiness. Because if I'm happy, we say a happy wife is a happy life. If I'm happy, I greet my husband differently. I deal with circumstances differently. I'm nicer to my children. If I make myself happy within my own life, then I am a much better spouse. If I am miserable in my own life, I will be a terrible spouse. And that is just bottom line, I think, the truth.
I totally hear it, but making yourself happy, it's like, well, I'd love to, excuse me, Rebbetzin, I'd love to make myself happy, but my husband does this, and he puts me down in front of my mother-in-law, and he, doesn't clean up after himself, and he's not making any money, and blah, 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 blah. So how can, there's an external, there's an internal, where do we go from there? What's the action steps?
Okay. So I think that a woman has to sit down one night by herself and think to herself, what do I want in my life? What do I want? Just me, myself and I, not my kids, not my spouse, just me. Maybe I want a certain job. Maybe I want a certain lifestyle. How do I go about achieving that? Do I need a life coach, a business coach, a therapist? How can I help myself? I'm not going to turn to my husband and say he hasn't done all these things. How can I help myself? Kind of, and it might sound counterintuitive, but I've seen it work so beautifully. Kind of separate yourself from your spouse and say, what would make me happy? How can I make myself happy? Is it going out for coffee with my friends once a week? Is it external things, getting new pillows for the couches? Is it spending more time on the phone with a good friend of mine who lives in a different country? Is it finally getting that degree that I promised myself I'd get 20 years ago, but I didn't because of what will make me happy? As soon as you do something that makes you personally happy, it echoes in every part of your life. And what I mean by that is that all women are three things. They are a wife. Hopefully, Mitzvah Hashem, if you're lucky and blessed, you're a mother. And then you're just yourself. You're like three different human beings. And what happens is that we feel depleted in all areas. Very often, you find a woman who's depleted everywhere. And when you're depleted everywhere, you're lost everywhere. So what I always try and say is that life is like a pie, and there's many slices. There's like, let's say I cut a pie into 8 slices, and one slice is my spouse, and one slice is my children, and one slice is my favorite hobby, and one slice is my exercise, and one slice is my career, and one slice is maybe my family. That means my siblings, my parents. That means our life is a whole pie, and everyone gets a segment. When we make our life one thing instead of lots of things, it's not only not true, but it is a recipe for failure. So let's say I say my whole pie, it's just my husband. So then he has to provide me also my career and also my relationship and also my health and also my hobby and also and it can't possibly be. No one can be everything for you. So you have to look at your pie and you have to look at your life and divide it into a pie and see, am I fulfilled anywhere? And when you speak to women, they will often tell you, I don't feel fulfilled in any of these slices. So it's unfair to say, and it's all my husband's fault because he's doing this and he's doing that, and he's doing that. We have to also acknowledge, the actions that we are taking in our own misery and that we are taking in our own lives. So it can't be my husband's fault that I haven't got my degree if I have never applied for it, if I've never applied for the grant for it, if I haven't sat down and written a personal statement, if I haven't made the phone calls to get the references. It can't be my husband's fault. Even if he says to me, I don't think you should get the degree, it's such a waste of time, but maybe go on your laptop and do all the steps that you need to do to take a degree, and then turn around and say, I found this amazing degree online that I really want to take. It's practically possible for me to take. I've been accepted onto the course. They've given me a grant or they've given me some kind of thing, and this is going to make me very happy. Very few husbands will turn around and say, I don't want you to do it. very few husbands. A lot of them say, great, go for it. No skin off my nose. You found a great thing for yourself. Meaning we are really, our own, we limit ourselves. We kind of put our own limitations, and we create much more power. We give much more power to our spouse, but it's really not them. It's really ourselves. And we use them as a way to hold ourselves back. It could be your husband's not speaking too nicely, and it could be he's not making enough money, but maybe you could also be making a lot of money and you just don't know it. And maybe even though in your mind, your whole life, you've been told, and it's the man that brings in the money and the woman is the one that stays home and looks after the kids. Maybe it's time to look at your marriage and say, I guess that's not my marriage. It might be other people's marriage. And I have lots of skills in, I don't know, home organization, or I did an architecture degree 20 years ago. I don't remember it, or whatever it is. And I think maybe I can put myself out there and make some money and contribute to the household. And maybe that will take more pressure off my husband. And then he won't be so stressed. And then he won't keep shouting. And it won't be so much. That means there are cycles that are happening all the time, and it's because of our expectations or beliefs in what a marriage has to look like, because that's your parents' marriage, or that's your best friend's marriage, or that's your neighbor's marriage, that you think, well, my marriage is not like that. So that could be, that could be holding you back.
So Rebbetzin is saying that where our happiness comes from is setting goals and fulfilling them. And looking at the pie and figuring out, okay, what's my goal in my children's, my relationship with my children? What's my goal in my relationship with my friendships or my exercise or whatever those aspects? And that you're saying that brings the is it happiness or is it satisfaction? And maybe, yeah. Maybe you could tell a little bit about because right now, I mean, I'm in America. So, everybody here, it's like the whole happiness is based on self-care. How many nail polish did you get? You went for lunch with friends, whatever. I'm just trying to hone down exactly what it is you feel about will bring that happiness.
So self-care can be a slice of your pie, but in nobody's life, self-care is their whole pie, which is why lots of women feel very unfulfilled after doing that for the whole week. So I would recommend that everybody sit down and draw a pie and draw a circle and make 8 slices and write different things in each thing, and then see where you feel full, where you feel full and where you're basically on empty, like a gas tank. I'm full here, I'm empty here, I'm 50% here, I'm 70% here. Now, if you have a pie, if you meet a woman whose pie is like 80% full, she'll rarely blame her husband for the misery in her life. Rarely. Because she'll be like, oh, I have a bad relationship with my siblings. It's because I don't call them enough. I don't see them enough. I didn't make the effort to go to their bar mitzvah or their wedding or something. And so next time I'm going to go to that simcha. And then she does, and she books a ticket and she goes to that simcha, and she comes back and she feels that slice of a pie is very full, and she feels very, and then maybe your self-care is low. Maybe you just eat cake for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and you haven't bothered to cut yourself a salad, and you haven't bothered to take a walk in the park, and so look at your self-care. Self-care is going to be exercise, it's going to be healthy eating, it's going to be making yourself look good, and sometimes that's by that will make you feel good. So maybe it is your nails, but that's just a slice. Again, it's never going to be your whole pie, which is why so many women roll their eyes when they're like self-care, because even though, of course, it's important, it's only ever going to be a slice. And therefore, you just have to make sure that is 80% full. None of them are going to be 100% full.
Gewaldig. Okay, what does the Rebbetzin feel is the most important factor for Shalom Bayis?
The most important factor, that you keep liking your spouse, because often they will do things in a marriage that will make you feel like, how could they make that joke? Or how could they say that thing? Or how can they think that that's the right thing to do? And what happens is that as human beings, we are so much focused on the negative that it's the thing that we remember instead of the positive. So your spouse does 80% of things that are positive and 20% things that are negative, because they're a human being, just like you're a human being. So just like he irritates you, you probably irritate him about 20% of the time. That's probably a normal percentage. But the problem is that we focus on that 20% and not on the other 80%. So sometimes I do a mental exercise of, what do I what did I really love that Yoni did this week that I really appreciate? And I try and meditate on that. Oh, he did that really nice thing, or he said that really nice thing, or I love that Torah, or whatever it was. And I try and meditate on that because my brain will automatically go to the negative, and I'm trying to pull it back to the positive.
So my next question is, I wanted to find out, you had mentioned in a pre-show interview, you had talked about how, chesed and rewarding a goof and rewarding our neshama, whatever. I was like, wow, my eyes popped open. So if you could just explain that a little bit to us, I think it'll be very, very valuable for people.
Okay. So we're talking about generally doing chesed and how chesed, olam chesed yiboneh, and how Pirkei Avos talks about that the world stands on three things: Torah, avoda, and gemilus chasodim. That means doing acts of chesed for other people, not because anyone will know about it, not because you're going to get a reward, just because we're here on this world to do chesed for other people. And I was talking about how recently I got involved in education, specifically in teenage girls. And I was sitting with a whole cohort of principals across America who all are, educating teenage girls. And they were discussing how the chesed that the girls are doing today, not everyone, but as a general rule, that the chesed that the girls are doing today are really for social reasons. Everyone is doing that chesed. Everyone's going to that camp. Everybody is hanging out with those people. I'm doing chesed because everybody will know about it, and I have some Rav hours, and then everybody will tell me how amazing I am. Then I get a free t-shirt and a free mug, and then I get to have all this kind of attention on the fact that we do chesed. And we're talking about how 20 years ago, before that, when girls used to do chesed, it was really because that person needed it, and it was actually done very much in secret. Nobody knew which family you were doing chesed at, and the person who was receiving chesed didn't have to feel embarrassed or didn't have to feel like they were in a goldfish bowl and that they were in public and everybody would know everything about them. It was done in a much more tzanua way. And we're discussing how mitzvahs that are done in a way that we get a lot of reward for it, it takes away our ability to feel the spiritual reward for doing a mitzvah. What is the spiritual reward for doing a mitzvah? The spiritual reward is I feel good afterwards. I feel like I've done something that is not just about me, something that is bigger than me. I feel like I've done something that is eternal, not something that no one can take away from me. I did this chesed for this person for half an hour, 45 minutes. I helped them out. I did, this is something that will stay with me forever. There's a feeling, there's a spiritual reward that we get instantly after doing a mitzvah, which is the good feeling that no one can take that away from you. And nowadays we've been so used to rewarding our children. Wow, you did something so wonderful. Here's an ice cream, or here's $10, or here's a prize from the prize store. Here's something that we take away our children's ability to feel the spiritual reward for doing a good deed, for doing the mitzvah. And chesed is one of the bases upon which Yiddishkeit is really rests. It rests on Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim, of doing acts of kindness. And if we never let our children feel the spiritual reward, I did something that was good, that was worthy, that builds me, that makes me a worthy person. If they don't ever get to feel that because you immediately give them that $10 bill or that prize or whatever, then you're taking something away from them that is very precious. You're taking away from them the inability to feel the spirituality or spiritual gain in this world, which is something that is its own reward. And it is something that we discuss a lot in educational spaces. How are we going to give our children that spiritual feeling? How are we going to preserve that? Because that is something that gives you a little bit of a feeling of nitzvius, of eternity.
So it's beautiful. And I want to know some of the solutions for it, because we've just brought up, this is what popped my eyes open. I'm like, wow, that is so emes. There is something, though, isn't there, that, you do something for the wrong reason, eventually you'll come to do it for the right reason. So that's my first question. And then the second question is, if it's true that, look, we're talking about for the teenagers. Yeah, those bad teenagers, they do it only if they get something in it. I could see it in my own self. It's like, oh, if I, make, somebody's ill and I make them a meal or whatever chesed I do. And it's like, oh, that's so wonderful. So nice of you. So I think we all have a little bit of that, not just the teenagers. So I would like to know what's the solve, so those two questions.
So first of all, it's true that it's almost impossible to do a mitzvah without an ulterior motivation. For children, for adults, for people who are 5, people who are 55. Of course, it's not, I'm not taking one group of people and saying it's only them, all of us, we are perfect and wonderful, but I'm not saying that at all. I'm just, so the question is, what is our ulterior motivation? So if we're talking about things that are feelings, then sometimes we can feel two emotions at the same time or two feelings at the same time. But if we're talking about material things, that cannot compete with the feeling. I'll tell you what I mean. Let's say I do a chesed for somebody, I make them a meal, and I tell my neighbor I made her a meal. And it was like part of me is like, look at me, well done. I managed to do that. I made myself a meal, and my neighbor goes, wow, Esther, you're so wonderful. I don't know how you managed to do it, and I feel good about myself. Yeah. So maybe I need that good feeling that somebody says to me, well done, you're a superwoman. But at the same time, I also get the feeling of I really did something for somebody. I handed over a meal to them. Maybe they were sick, maybe just had a baby, maybe they're sitting shiva, whatever it is. And I really did something good. So I have maybe two competing feelings or two competing motivations. But it's very different than having a monetary reward for it. So I was reading in a parenting book that so a child there was a specific 10-year-old boy who after a Mishnah Seder would help to clear up the Beis HaMedrash. And he did that like once a week, every week for like a year. And then throughout the summer, this Rebbe was going to do another Mishnah, like Seder with other boys, and he offered to pay this boy some money to help clear up afterwards because he'd done it so nicely for a whole year. And then the following year, where they started a regular year again, the Rebbe said to him, oh, you're going to carry on clearing up the Beis HaMedrash. So this boy says, only if you'll pay me. So he goes, but you used to do it for me for free. So he turns around to the Rebbe, he goes, you think I'm going to be a fool for the rest of my life, do things for free when I can really be paid for it? So I think there is something.
Oh, that's so sad.
What did he say? He felt like all the times I did it for free, you were taking advantage of me because really you would have paid somebody to do this. So what do we learn from this story? That by paying him, we actually took away from him the spiritual feeling like I can do something good for Hashem's sake. So what we're really saying is that the feeling of doing something good that is something bigger than you, a selfless act, if you like. So can anything be really truly selfless? I don't know. And lots of people say no, not possible, however old you are. But could it be that it's 80% selfless and 20% selfish? Could we make it the selflessness a higher percentage? We could always work on doing that. Because there's competing feelings inside ourselves, or it's competing hashkafic ideas. But it's very hard, and I say this specifically for children because they're not mature enough. Their brain hasn't matured enough. So when we give them a physical reward, here is a toy, here's a Game Boy, here is a $20, here is a whatever it is. When we give them a physical reward, we're basically saying that every action is worth a certain amount of money, and what's really important is the money. Like we've made the material reward really the ends instead of a means to an ends. So then they learn that really what we're trying to do is get the most material things we can get, however much in prizes we can get, however much money we can get. We've made that into the highest value, and so and it's very hard to compete with that. That's what I'm saying.
That's gewaldic. Okay, it gives us a direction to head towards. Very, very good. I love the 80%, 20%, whatever. I'm going to work on that myself. Okay, last question. What is one action a woman can do today to bring Shalom Bayis into her home?
Find something that will make herself happy. Put herself in a better mood. If you find yourself right now, today, in a bad mood, and you think, if I eat a froyo, if I call my friend, if I get my nails done, if I have a half an hour nap, if I decide to make my favorite dinner of salmon and broccoli and rice, if I just fill in the blank, something that you can do quickly and easily to fill your own cup. We as women find ourselves very depleted all the time. And that is really often the source of our own misery. And if you are unhappy, you won't be a good spouse, you won't be a good mother, you won't be good for anything. You probably won't be good even at work. You won't be good in your career, meaning the one thing that you can do to help yourself right now that actually doesn't rely on anyone else, and this is a very important understanding, is find something that will make you happy right now. And if it's your favorite chocolate, so then it's your favorite chocolate. And if it's something, if it's a walk in the park, go for a walk in the park. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. The point is that if you fill your own cup, you can then give from an overflowing cup. It's very hard to give from an empty cup.
Wow, fantastic. So many sound bites that I want to savor. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin. It was wonderful to have you. The advice is going to stick with us and grow in our own neshamas because it's very, very profound and wise. Really appreciate you being here. Okay, this is Leah Richeimer for the Ladies Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody.